Okay, we'll call the committee of the whole meeting for February 28th to order at 12:30 p.m. I'll ask for a motion that Councillor Smith adopt the agenda for the committee of the whole meeting February 28th, 2022 as presented.
I so move, Mayor.
Thank you very much. All in favor? Carried. Sorry, the printer upstairs here, Stuart crashed the printer printing out all the assessments, so which isn't surprising, but I can't print off my documents that I wanted to. We'll fire it right into literally Cody with the year-end report.
Can we adopt the minutes first?
Oh, you want to do that kind of stuff?
Yes, please.
Okay, that's fine. Ask for a motion from Councillor Walsh that the committee of the whole adopt the minutes from the February 14th, 2022 committee of the whole meeting as presented.
I'll give you that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All in favor? Motion carries. Now we'll go over to Cody, please.
Afternoon, Mayor and Council. Just wanted to take some time this afternoon to go over our 2021 annual fire department report that we've put together. In past, we really haven't done anything as collaborative as this, so definitely feedback to Chris or however you guys want to take that avenue would be welcome, so that in 2022 when we do this again, we can collect other information that you guys might be looking for. So I'm going to try and share my screen here. And you guys can see that? Perfect. So I'll just kind of zip through the first part of the report. So message from the chief. You guys have, I'm assuming, have all had an opportunity to go through this, but kind of to sum up the year, again, it was another challenging year for organizations, community as a whole, with the COVID and all those challenges that we were faced with. However, for our department, it was a really proud moment as we finished our renovation of the fire station, and we're able to move into it in September. So that was a huge achievement in 2021 for us. So basically a quick rundown of the organization chart now with some of the recent changes to how we are with protective services now falling under myself, and to kind of tie in some of the other pieces here. Our bylaw officer, we've extended a letter, and we should have our next bylaw officer in place here within the next week. So that was just come down last week from us for information. Capital projects last year in 2021 was our self-contained breathing apparatus, or SCBA. We did a joint project between Hills County, Town of Black Diamond, Town of Turner Valley, and ourselves with the purchase on the SCBAs. This allows us to be interoperable between all the departments, and cylinders are exchangeable, packs are exchangeable, masks, all the rest of that. And we did see a significant cost savings in doing that approach for that mass purchase, as opposed to us just going and buying what we needed. And so typically these units are a 15-year lifespan on them. So the plan will be is hopefully in the 15 years we can do the same kind of purchase again with the other municipalities. And then obviously the renovation, we've added some pictures in here of some of the phases and stuff as it was progressing. So we're happy to say now that we're in, and we have, I would say, 99% of all the deficiencies taken care of. A few warranty items that we're still working on right now, but vast majority of everything is taken care of and is up and running and in place. So things seem to be working really well for us. Kind of 2021 highlights. Last year, the department responded to a total of 918 calls. Of those calls, 744 were in the Town of High River corporate limits, and 174 of those were in Foothills County. We inspected 21 smoke alarms, carbon monoxide alarms, in homes. And with our fires that we did have, it created a total dollar savings of $28,404,500 in savings. So basically taking a building that's worth $1 million, and if we had a $500,000 fire or loss in that building, that would show as a $500,000 savings, because it was $500,000 for that property saved. We issued 12 burn permits within the town of High River. Stuart, through his program, completed 443 fire inspections. So these range from new startups, food truck inspections, some site inspections or construction inspections, kind of a wide range of inspections that he completes. We did the Spitzy Pumpkin Drop, which we do annually now. And Facebook, we were fairly active on it with 1,674 followers. And then we averaged 2.5 calls per day. So when you take that 918 and divide it, it's about 2.5 calls a day that we respond to. So this chart here just shows our calls, call volume annually. So from going back from 2017 up to 2021. And the chart below kind of breaks down where we're seeing that increase. So last year, we've seen an increase in fire-related calls. And what that breaks down to is building fires, grass and rubbish fires, and then also kind of those fire pit complaints or come in as maybe a building fire type of event. So we did see a bit of an increase in last year's numbers from that. Vehicle accidents, significant increase last year from 2020. And again, I attribute that back to not as many people driving in 2020 versus 2021. Alarms, so this is any sort of alarm activation, whether it be in your home or business. Gas leaks, so carbon monoxide alarms or natural gas leaks. Medicals are broken down, so we lump them all into one category, but they actually break further down into medical first responses and medical co-responses. And to give a bit of a snippet there, a medical first response is a call where there is no ambulance in the town of High River, or it's within outside of a 10-minute response window. So last year, we responded to 177 medical first responses. And then the other ones are medical co-responses, where the ambulance is on scene and maybe asks for a lift assist or to come assist them, or we are automatically toned out on higher priority calls to respond with the EMS unit. And there was 382 of those. So that's kind of how our medicals break down. And then we have the miscellaneous category, which captures investigations, water rescues, explosions, kind of those one-off type calls that we may only see one or two of throughout the year. There's just the pie chart breakdown of the percentage of our call basis for 2021. And then the chart below that is our per quadrant. We see that the Northwest and Southeast of High River have very similar amount of calls that we respond to them in. Northwest being our lowest at 9%, given a very small percentage of our population are actually in the Northeast of High River. And then Southwest is sitting around 23% of our calls. Calls per day of the week just breaks down our Wednesday is our hotspot for calls, which is interesting. I can't attribute that to anything, but it's hump day, I guess. So it's kind of seems to be our busiest day of the week, with Friday being less, which is interesting as well. The chart below that breaks down our calls to Foothills County and the town of High River. So we did see a 3% increase last year to responses out into Foothills County as opposed to the town of High River. Councillor Smith, I see you have Councillor Jones, I see you have your hand up. I don't want to get too far and lose your question.
That's okay, thank you. One, with those sort of increase in medical calls, does that have anything to do with the issues with the EMS not being available in our area at the time, or?
I think certainly a good percentage of them would be, when you look at, I can go back here to this chart. When you look at us, it's basically almost a 70 call increase. I think last year in 2021 was partially due to those, again, having less ambulances available, but I also think we did do a lot of COVID related responses as well. So again, some of those numbers increased. But when you look back from 21 to say 2017 or 2018, the numbers aren't that far off. So, which is interesting.
Okay, and then I did have one more question, because you're in the Northwest here, you have, like you said, about 30% of the calls, but it's also a longer, and you haven't got there yet, but a longer period of time to get to the Northwest. Will
Yes.
there ever be a time, whether it's size of town or that the Northwest will need a vehicle on this side?
I think that is going to be a question for the future as to what does that look like and what is our threshold or our turning point on when we look at that. It is something that we do need to start considering. But again, it's what is the threshold? Is it people? Is it a development? Is it calls? What, there's a few matrices that we can put into place to help us paint that picture on where we're going to be.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. So there's exactly the, sorry, Councillor Kinghorn.
Thank you, Cody. Just to follow up to Councillor Jones' question, I thought there's some standards that are out there that we need to comply with based on population and that comes from the insurance industry as well. You maybe down the road sometimes send us those when you expect or what the requirements are, and then we can sort of looking ahead a bit. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And that you're absolutely right. There is fuss, fire underwriters that does play into that matrix as well. And it also does play into this response time chart here. These are response times per quadrant. So southeast, southwest, northeast, and northwest. Our average response time into the northwest. And again, when we talk northwest, this could be the Tim Hortons, which is very, if you want to call it on the peripherals of the northwest, Sunrise Village or the seniors home there, right? So if you had more calls in that very peripheral, it's going to actually drop this time down. But we're looking at about 8 minutes and 30 to 40 seconds roughly to the northwest. Now, if we wanted to take and look at the very far tip of the northwest, we are over 10 minutes when we start talking onto High Country Rise and that far north end. In the southeast, we're seeing response times right around that 4 minutes and 48 seconds. So this is from the time the 911 caller picks up the phone and we are alerted to the time that the fire truck is arriving on scene. That's what this whole time entails. So process time and the whole bit. So as we've kind of go through the years, we have seen a little bit of a decrease in some of the times. Most of them have stayed fairly static, given that we really haven't added any new staff. We haven't added any new fire stations or anything like that. And then public education last year, in 2020, this large number of pub ed was mainly due to our birthday drive-bys and that sort of stuff that we were tracking. Last year, when things locked down again, we had stopped doing birthday drive-bys, and so it was kind of an awkward pause for us in our fire prevention stuff and public education. So we're really hopeful that with the new reduction in our COVID restrictions, that we'll be able to see those numbers go up, get kids back into the fire hall for tours, and get out there to seniors' homes and do our talks like we normally do. And then this is our inspections. As you can see, in 2017 we got about halfway through the year when we actually hired an inspector. And then as we have had Stuart in place, we've definitely seen our inspections creep up as we progress. And these are kind of our inspections by type, the pie chart below. Most of them are complaint or annual type of inspections that we're seeing, and or follow-up inspections. So those annual would be ones that we try to get into certain types of businesses, at least on an annual basis, to make sure that everything is good. And again, some changes to our quality management plan, which was done last year, helps to steer, I guess, our direction on what we do for inspections and what type and how often we get into them. And then this is just a bit of a cap on our social media. So our top countries, Canada, US, and UK. And then these are our top cities of where our followers are from and our demographics. So it's kind of very interesting to see some of the demographics. We are far reaching, we're reaching 45 countries with our Facebook page right now. And that's partly due, I think, to some of our staff members that have family that live in UK and some other places that help to spread that around. And that's all that I have for you. So I'm going to try and figure out how to unshare this. And I'll take any questions.
Thanks, Cody. Councillor Kinghorn, you've still got your hand up.
Oh, bad boy.
I see no further questions now, Cody.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Well done. Thanks, buddy. Okay, we'll move right on to Chris and the rec center expansion discussion.
Just give me a chance. Can you guys see my screen?
You bet.
So what I want to do is following up on our last meeting. Well, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Good to see you on this lovely Monday morning. First day of May is tomorrow, St. David's Day. And
What?
St. David's Day, the patron saint of the Welsh, just so you know. So this is a kind of a summary of how we got to where we are. And so I'm going to run council through the step-by-step process of the conversations that took place starting in 2019, how the concept was chosen, some of the pricing scenarios. I've also reached out to a couple of colleagues that are working on pool concepts right now in both Alberta and BC and gotten some revised pricing. And bear that in mind that this is inflationary pricing, so don't be too scared by it. And then talk about potential timelines and scenarios, whatever council's direction may be, and come down to a couple of key questions about how we move this forward as a priority, and whether or not it remains a priority from council's perspective. So that's not working. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I got to reshare. So that's the screen. You can see that screen, right?
Is aquatic facility expansion how we got here?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it won't advance for some reason. All right. So there we go. So in 2018, Gibbs Gage presented a study as part of the capital planning process that was basically doing a brand new aquatic facility, both the lap pool tank and a leisure pool component. When the price tag came in, council at that time, the initial scope was too costly. It was a $30 million plus kind of range. And at that time, our borrowing capacity in 2018 was around the $36 million range. So in early 2019, administration was directed to go back to Gibbs Gage and come back with options, and a scaled back option of what could take place on that site too, as far as it relates to aquatic expansion. So they came back with an opportunity in 2019, and just as I got here, a report was coming to council in November of 2019 with a target budget of about $12 million and a new aquatic concept that specifically retained the existing lap pool the way it was. So the existing lap pool would be there, a new leisure component with a level entry, as well as a kid component, and new hot tubs and saunas and a water slide were going to be part of that package. The total cost of those also involves some renovations to the existing, new change rooms, rejigging the change rooms that we had already, and moving those into the new facility. Administration at that time said we could continue studying it, but we needed to kind of figure out what the direction was moving on, and that an option just needed to be picked, and that we could build a business case. And council at that time directed us to build a business case and come back to council as a way to to ask the taxpayers if they support something. So in December of 2020, a presentation was made talking about the concept, refining it, and coming out with a cost scenario that was potentially palatable from a public perspective. So the pool concept that was there, we went from a 43,000 square foot pool aquatic facility down to a $13,000 leisure pool concept. It included the leisure pool, a level entry, spray park type components, water slide, new hot tub, a sauna, and new family change rooms, which was a new concept that has come out, kind of not male and female change rooms, but joint family change rooms, and dealing with that. It also encompassed about 9,000 square feet of renovations to the existing building, changing the old change rooms into a party room, a child minding space, new office space. And the 2019 estimate with contingency was about $13 million at that time. So we took that forward, and council said, yeah, let's proceed. What we wanted to make clear to the public, though, we also wanted to know that it didn't include any of these other components. So it didn't include any fitness component. It didn't include a climbing wall. It didn't include any additional gymnasium space or combative space, no indoor playground structure of any kind for moms and tots kind of programs. And those are all items that rated in the 2018 study, rated quite high from the public perspective. But our focus remained on the entry-level leisure type pool facility and focused solely on the aquatic expansion. So that our financial scenario focused on that aquatic expansion and the preferred concept of that level entry. And we wanted to get a sense of comfort on what the financial impact would be, both operationally. Capital is easy to take care of. It's the operational cost, as you probably saw from the numbers that Nancy shared at the last meeting. It's the operational cost that's the killer. And we need to make sure that we can manage that operational cost. And we wanted to establish what a target tax would be and a user fee scenario as well for the public. So just a couple pictures of what the concept would look like. It would be going out the west side of the building off the existing tank, and then facility and off the existing hall of the field house. We'd have new change rooms in the leisure component. Aquafit could be taking place in the shallow end of this pool as well. No lap swimming, and all lap swimming would be in the existing tank. That's a little bit of a close-up of it. So you can see that it's a family change room concept, and so it changes the dynamics a bit. It's a different concept to be that process. I've never been in one, so I don't know what it actually feels like. So it'll be interesting how the public receives that. That's what a couple of the concepts of the exterior could look like. Not architecturally pleasing right now, but those need to be refined a bit, and we'd have to do some work on that. And this is just conceptual. And what it would look like from the north side. The 2021 is estimated capital numbers that we use because 2020 and 2021 remained relatively flat because of COVID. And I'm going to back up a bit too. Before COVID hit, we had planned a field trip with council. We were going to take them to Canmore, Cochrane, and Brooks to take a look at 3 similar facilities in 3 similar sized communities. And to take a look at what they've done, talk about the operations, ask questions of their staff, ask questions of their elected officials. COVID hit, they had to cancel the field trip. And so we didn't have those opportunities to take a look at actual facilities on the ground. And so we put that on hold, and because of COVID, we came forward with the business case in late 2020. And so the costs that you see here are the 2021 numbers based upon the 2019 estimates. And I've kind of updated the numbers a bit based upon those costs. I'll get into those in a sec, but you could see that, with contingency and cost of design, we're sitting at about $14.4 million, and that was why the premise of the $15 million ask when we took it to referendum. Now, the referendum concept that we took forward was a non-binding approach. It was there to gather the input of the public. It was there to kind of gauge the support within the community. It was there to build to see where our gaps were, and we took kind of a soft, not even a soft sell approach. Here's the information and go from there. Now, it got a little bit complicated from that perspective, and I'll talk about that in a sec.
Hey, Chris, can we just hit pause for a second?
Yeah.
Jenny has a question. She's got her hand up before we get ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just had a question about that leisure pool idea. Would the children's swim lessons be in, would that be used for the swim lessons? Because I know part of the problem with the pool as is, it's too deep on the shallow end for swim lessons.
Yeah. On some aspects, Councillor Jones, they could be used for like a mums and tots and baby swim classes. When you take your 6-month-old to get accustomed to water, those types of things. I think the leisure pool concept could be used for those types of programs. Especially when you take a look at the leisure pool, there is kind of this lane concept where Aquafit could take place, so that would be perfect to be 3 feet deep. Perfect for parents with mums and tots kind of programs. So. It would allow kind of diversity of programming to take place. You could take typical children's swimming lessons in the lap pool and have a mums and baby program in the leisure pool concept potentially.
But the young children would still be in the lap pool.
Yes, more likely.
Okay.
Any more questions before I move on? So 14.4 million, we rounded up to 50 million to ask the question. these are Class D. I want to be clear. These are Class D type cost estimates. So they're high level. They haven't been refined at all. They're based upon the information that we know. There is information that we don't know, geotechnical concerns, what the soils are like, those types of things that we still have to answer those questions to. But that will be part of the detailed design process. So when we took this forward, that we went based upon a parcel tax concept or a local service area concept. So everybody pay a flat fee parcel tax instead of based upon assessment. When we took a look at the assessment approach, it meant that the commercial users were getting hit by 3 times as much property tax just for this component. And we felt that from an administration perspective, felt that was unfair to put that burden on the businesses, and that the primary users of an expanded aquatic facility would be, of course, the residents, not the business community. And so this flat rate parcel tax concept was kind of integrated into that and moving forward. At that time in 2020, our current interest rates were at 2.16% for a 25-year borrow, which is super cheap money. And our annual cost of debt service that was about $754,000 per year. Total interest was going to be paid about $4.5 million. And we projected the parcel tax to be $121 per year per parcel. So 6,200 parcels in town, everybody gets paid the same when it comes to a parcel tax for the capital cost of construction. It was the fairest approach. It treated everybody equally. And we understood that. Now, a couple caveats. We didn't know the underground conditions. So we had to make sure. And you know what? As with all renovations, when we renovated our house, we always find in this surprises, shortcuts that the previous contractors took. You know, that the as-builts don't show exactly what was actually there, and then you have to make those changes. But we felt that, you know, quite comfortably that we had good information, that we were confident that we could be with the contingency within that $50 million price point. Now, I went out and reached out to a few communities right now, and bear in mind 2022 right now, the pricing that's out there is some of it's a little crazy, especially when it gets into delays associated with steel, structural steel, and some of the other materials that are out there. So I've updated that from 2019 to 2022 numbers. It comes into about a $17 million ask. That's going to go up or go down. Now, the big thing that's probably more affecting this is going to be this number. And that's the number of our, the posted rate as of February 2022 from the province is 3.94, and they increased that. So that's a 1.8% increase, still cheap money, but it does impact what the parcel tax would actually be and how much debt we would pay over, how much interest we would pay over the term. So now we move from a $754,000 a year debt repayment to, you know, $1.1 million debt repayment, and total interest paid over the term of about $10 million bucks. It increases from $121 per parcel per year to $178 per parcel per year kind of concept. So that's, you know, those interest rates are going to continue to increase and continue to climb. And we were asked questions through the process why we're not using reserves, because our reserves are quite healthy, but they're not reserves dedicated to this facility. And we have a whole host of other assets that we have to replace, and we can't put all our investments into one nest, so to speak, and invest all into this facility. And we felt it was transparent. We may move forward with a borrow on this and use part of our borrowing room, and that still left us sufficient borrowing room for a new wastewater treatment plant, a new water treatment plant, and any of those other facilities that we may have to upgrade, so that we felt that we had enough contingency there planned for the future. And so we wanted to make sure that from that perspective. So that was kind of where we ended up on a 2022 number perspective. Now, what that does, you know, our estimated operational costs, when we took a look at that, with any of the larger facility, you're going to have increased supervision requirements. You're going to have increased capacity. All pools are based upon your capacity and how many lifeguards you need per person kind of concept. We're going to have increased hydro and increased chemicals being used, and we're going to have increased general maintenance across the entire facility. Now, none of this modeling includes any asset replacement or recapitalization. So I want to make that clear to council that there's no safety net for building failures or anything along those lines. So based upon our research, we looked at the operational costs for this expansion to be about $1.5 million per year. So it's an increase of about 47% over our current levels. So that, you're seeing us going from a $5 million operating budget for the rec center to about a $6.5 million operating budget for the rec center from that perspective. Now, I'm always on the conservative side when it comes to revenue projections. I don't want to be overly optimistic and all of a sudden we never meet those projections. So we kind of budgeted between a 34 to 44% annual cost for revenue, which is about a 510 to 660,000 per annum increase in revenue that we would collect, not an increase. Our operational shortfall would be between 840,000 to 990,000 just for the aquatic center itself for this expansion. And that translated into a 4.2 to almost 5% tax increase to cover that shortfall. And so that was part of the key piece, because the operation part is you can build whatever you want, but if you don't have the people coming into it, and if you don't have the people paying for the use, then it's just in essence a white elephant, and you've got to be careful from that perspective. Now, it also goes back to our conversation last meeting too, about what is the philosophy when it comes to community recreation. Is it something that should be subsidized fully by taxation, or should it be user fee based? And so those philosophies on how we build the business plan moving forward are going to be important components on whether or not an expansion is even feasible of this existing facility, or I'll state my professional opinion right now. I'm not so sure a new facility is even in the context within the next 25 or so years. So I think that's something to bear in mind. So when we broke this down to a parcel perspective from an education piece for the 2021, we figured that it'd be $121 per parcel for capital costs, and we put the number in there because people always want to ask the number, how much is it going to cost to operate for my taxes. We threw in the $160 per parcel kind of thing. Not that it's going to translate that way, but we wanted to make sure that they saw a very, very clear number. That math is wrong. That's $281 per parcel. Sorry. That's why I'm a CAO, I guess. And so we did that. Now, it doesn't take in the recapitalization or replacement costs. It doesn't take into consideration how it detracts from other priority projects and the tax impacts associated with those if we have to borrow money for it. It doesn't deal with asset management, and it doesn't include any of the furnishings or the soft costs associated with the process. And to be clear, this is using our own land. If we have to go out and acquire new land, this model increase in cost substantially. Some risks that we presented to council for them to consider. Slide. For the first 3 to 5 years, what we've seen historically is that there's a bounce back. There's this, due to the novelty and due to the different facility, there is kind of an increased usership, which is a good thing. And so that was a key component, that there'll be some novelty, there's newness, it'll be an attractant. It'll be maybe one of those fundamental things that people will relocate to the community because they know that it's here. They may not use it every day, but they know that it's here. And so we felt that the novelty for the first 2 to 5 years. And we always saw a little bit of a reduction. When you take a look at the models across leisure pool components, they see a little bit of a reduction in the usership after that 5-year component. Partially demographics, partially novelty, partially different distractions for kids of that age, and it moves on. The other thing that we wanted to identify was that it does not necessarily address the community recreational needs overall. We knew that in the survey that was done in 2018, mind you, it's 4 years old, four-year-old data now, that there was other interests and other components that the community valued just as high. So we knew that if that some of the risks or the pros or cons, whatever you want to term it, was that it could impact future recreational needs for indoor recreation. So any expansion to gymnasiums, those types of things. The interest rates, they were relatively low. It was cheap money in 2020, but we were expecting that rates would increase, and even at 3.94% over 25 years, that's pretty cheap money too. And so we're in a pretty good spin of interest rates for municipalities. We knew that some of the risks associated too were the fact that other components of our infrastructure were going to need to have access to borrowing of that money too, be it the wastewater treatment plant, be it the water treatment plant, be it the big arena slab, those types of things we need to be very clear. that we didn't use up all that borrowing space for something in the future. And we had too much dependence on single family home growth. I think, fundamentally, when we take a look at single family home growth and we talk about growth as part of the town plan, you're going to see that single family homes are really tax losers. And our diversity of our residential base has to get more diverse and increase in higher density in order to balance that out a bit. Now, some of the benefits, I think there's a whole host of benefits here, and they're probably not all listed here, but it's a new asset. It's got the potential to enhance quality of life and promote healthy lifestyles and inclusive families. It's an attraction. It can attract potential business investors to relocate here with their businesses. It could be residential attraction to relocate with their families, but it does create that support and that network for a vibrant and complete community. And you know what? I'm going to be honest with you. Right now, we're all dealing with estimates. Until you actually go out for tender, you don't know your true pricing. And until you get to that tender phase and you get all the bids and you go through them all, you do not know what the true pricing may be. It could be substantially lower than what we're estimated in our Class D. It could be substantially higher. And so it's something to bear in mind that, we can go through all this process and have all these financial scenarios, but until we actually tender that, we don't know what the number is going to be. And so we need to be cognizant of that. So I think that's a key risk or benefit, is that we might get better, more advantageous pricing in the future. Now, I did put a little bit of a timeline scenario here for everybody to consider, because this is a strategic priority of council on the rec facility aspect of things. And we don't know what the direction is going to look like moving forward. I wanted to kind of, just so it frames you in mind, we can't, if council were to give us the green light today to go ahead with an aquatic expansion, we're still 2 or 3 years away before it's even operational. We haven't even done detailed design. We're only in concepts. We have got tons of engineering yet to do. And we've got to also build the business case and the business plan on how it's going to operate. So there's a lot of work yet to do. So we're probably 3 to 4 years away before it's even got people walking through the front doors. Now, if we wanted to talk about an expansion and continue to go forward with a referendum, there is a hard sell approach that I've worked with before that kind of calls with it. And this is kind of the time frame. And if you were going to go through a hard sell approach and take this back to referendum, and I'm not recommending either way, is that you're probably looking at 62 months before you're in the operational aspect. Now, that's for a renovation. If you're talking about a new facility somewhere else, you're probably in the realms of between 7 to 10 years before you're even operational aspect of things. By the time you build your partnerships, find funding schemes, find the land, and for a rec facility of our size, you're probably looking at around 30 acres to accommodate that facility, and that's something we don't really have. And so, when we take a look at it, that's why the previous council chose renovation to the existing, because it was more feasible. It was within something that we could control. It was the destiny that we could control and the future that we could predict. And we felt that it was a number that was affordable for the community from that perspective, as it integrated into the taxes. And that's something we always have to measure into, because people will go wherever the taxes are cheaper. We wanted to balance that quite effectively, or as effectively as we could. Now, a couple key questions for you to think about. And this is kind of the end of the presentation. Do we continue moving forward, exploring a new rec complex somewhere else in the community or outside our boundaries? Or do we refocus on what we can afford and come back to the community with a firmer concept of the aquatic expansion, maybe some other components added to it that makes some sense and that is affordable and accessible to all? If it is just the aquatic expansion, based upon the feedback we've received to date, can council make a decision to move forward? Do they feel comfortable making a decision moving forward? Now, the referendum was non-binding. It was there to gauge the support, and it's while it's not a conclusive number, it gives you kind of that flavor within the community. And I think there were some distractions through the election process too. I'll be honest. I think some people were hoping that this brand new state-of-the-art facility was on the horizon and that was affordable. And I'm not so sure. I'm going to be honest. I don't think it is affordable for this community without significant partnerships and significant sacrifices to the future infrastructure management of the community. I think we've got to bear that in mind. So I think we've got to build whatever council direction is on recreation facilities, and how it gets refocused or how it moves forward needs to focus on that affordability side of things for the residents and what makes sense, and not be dependent on other people. I see Jamie's got his hand up. Councillor Kinghorn, if you want to have a question.
Sorry, maybe I'm jumping ahead there, Chris, but there was, staying with the theme of a new facility, we talked about it really lightly. And I think that the number, correct me if I'm wrong, was about 50 million, excluding land costs. Is that correct?
For like a brand new, so are
Yeah.
you talking about a rec facility encompassing everything we have today?
Actually, I was just talking about the pool part, a new pool at a new location.
Yeah, a new pool would be, I think in the 2019 estimates was between 30 and 40 million dollars, not
Okay.
including land costs and the and site development costs.
Okay, maybe then 50 was the extra 10 was for the land, so
Yeah.
roughly 40 plus land costs, whatever that might be.
Mhm.
And as you stated earlier, almost more or as importantly, is the operating cost of a standalone facility. This
Yeah.
particular one with the addition, we had said that it would be an additional rough 660,000 for operating. If it was a standalone, I've been told that the operating would be significantly higher. Do you have a rough number what that would be?
I would probably add about 20% to that number. It's not anywhere near double. At the end of the day, your lifeguards are going to be just moving over there separately, but you're going to be doubling up on CSRs. You're going to be doubling up on facility operators, depending on how close they are to the existing facility or if they're far away. At the end of the day, you've got to manage that from that perspective, and it may have different hours of operation too. So,
So
you know, I think-
800,000 would be a
Mhm.
reasonable number? Okay,
Yeah.
so
I
that
think
gives us some concrete numbers on a standalone new facility and what you've done here. But so the if we directed you to proceed as per your slide here, obviously that's going to take some investment. What sort of investment or money are we looking at to go through this process? Just a rough, I don't expect you to be down to detail, but just a rough number.
Well, besides the staff time associated with it, your RFP for architectural services to refine that is probably, at this point, is probably in the range of $100,000 to $150,000. We're not even into detailed design. Detailed design is just the function of the total cost of the facility. It's 20% standard architectural design of the cost of the facility of their estimated cost. Now, what the actual tender cost is, what their estimated costs are. So, at 15 million, we're talking about a $300,000 detailed design kind of exercise associated with that. So, you're probably, with architectural and engineers and the conceptual, we're probably talking around $650,000 ballpark.
For this slide?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
If we were going to go all the way to detailed design, Jamie.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks, Chris. Now, this is an extremely important decision that this council is going to have to make in the near future. And there's basically three options that council has. And one is to continue on with the expansion that was proposed previously, to go down the road of looking at a full new rec facility or just a standalone aquatic facility, but basically a new facility of some kind. Or the third option is to do nothing. Today is the day that starts this discussion for this new council, and Chris has kind of teed it up here to get this thing started. And the important thing on these projects and these types of discussions is that everybody asks the questions they need to have answered, and that council, between council members and administration, that the hard conversations actually happen. And it's okay. These have to happen in public meetings, and that's where we get things done. But please don't stay quiet on it. Make sure that all your questions are answered so that we have clarity and you know exactly which direction you are voting on when we get to that day, because we have to make this decision. One of the three options is going to be in play, and we have to pick a direction on this. So I'll leave it up there. I just want to make sure that everybody's open and honest as to where we go from here. So I'll hand it over. Kelly's got a question first.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a couple questions actually. So the first one is, what is the timeline for the expectation for like the wastewater treatment plant and any of the other sort of more major or significant remedies that will be required? Do we have a timeline or a sense of that? Riley, can you speak to that?
Sure, I can speak to that. Our current license requires us to have an application in before environment by September 1st. And so that's the design contract that council awarded just before Christmas. And so that's what we're working on right now. I would expect we'll have a budget proposal for next year for something. What that is, I'm not quite sure yet. So it could be, I'm not even sure in terms of the dollar amount. It's going to be in the millions. It's going to be big. Our range of estimates is anywhere from 7 to 17. And depending
That's
on
just on wastewater, is it not, Riley?
correct.
Right.
Sorry, did I miss the question? Was
No,
No,
Councillor Smith?
Okay, I just
I
wanted to
started
make
with
sure.
wastewater, so if
Okay.
there's probably more, right?
Yeah, so that's the wastewater. We are required to have an application in by September 1st. And that will translate into a budget request that council will likely see for 2023. So that's where that one is.
Okay, and then the water, like, is there one for the water treatment facility too?
So wastewater is driven by our license requirements. Alberta Environment has a desire for us to meet certain effluent requirements, and they are enforcing that through our license. It is not capacity driven. The water treatment plant is a capacity driven upgrade. So the timing on that one's a little looser. It's essentially, we have to do it when we need the water. Right now, we're close to capacity. How far we can stretch that is debatable. And how fast does new growth come online? We would have actually expected to have it on the table by now, but we haven't seen a lot of growth the last couple of years. And we've seen with a lot of this main replacement tightening up of our system. And so reducing leakage has offset our growth, and so that capacity is still there. And so right now it is kind of something that's out there and largely dependent on growth. So if all of a sudden growth takes off, we could be talking about it in a couple of years, or, could you push it out 10 years maybe if growth is slow? So sorry, no specific on it, that answer on that one, because it is, like I said, growth driven.
Okay, and then, so in your revenue projections, Chris, that was based obviously on an increase of usage, but what's the benchmark? Like if your number was it 47% or 34 to 44%?
Yeah, certainly the benchmark is variable across recreation facilities across the country. There are communities like St. Albert that runs at an 84% cost recovery when it comes to all their recreation programs, or Cochrane that runs at 80% cost recovery when it comes to all the recreation. As you saw with the last slide, in our overall recreation, we don't have necessarily all the components broken up on a benchmarking aspect of things, but when you take a look at we generate on recreation aspect of things about $1.5 million in overall revenue, and we operate at about a $3.5 million tax subsidy in essence going there. We're operating around a 30% cost recovery. So that's why we felt comfortable with 34 to 44%, because we know with a novelty, with new things, people come to them, right? It's just like water meter. Whenever you hit increased water meter rates, you'll see your consumption go down by 30% because people are afraid of what their bill is going to be. But guess what? They're back up by 35% the following year. And so we see that happen even in recreation services. And so I think the revenue, the revenue stream is something that we have to wrestle with on recreation overall, not just the aquatic facility, but recreation overall, and figure out what is the best approach as it relates to our philosophy of a healthy, active, inclusive community. And so we have to kind of integrate those components in there. So hard one to answer, Kelly, because we haven't done a lot of benchmarking here, and with the data that we do have, it's hard. It's very time consuming currently to pull out the information to really give you a good benchmarking number. But yeah, when we're compared to top of the, that 80 to 84%, that'd be great to get. If we got there, be super happy. If we got to 50%, we would be super happy, right?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, if you're looking at the original proposal that presented today with the schematics, I mean, you're right. It doesn't include a climbing wall, and it doesn't include. So those are additional attractions that would generate, more buzz and more presence for the facility, and obviously increases the bottom line. But is there, I don't know what Canmore did, I don't know what Cochrane did, but did they go out and actively seek partners to help with that, or corporate partners to help offset some of those costs? Is that not something we could take on?
Yeah, I think it's all obviously something that Cochrane's is a totally different model because it's run by a society, and the town contributes as well as Rockview, and Rockview does not contribute. Let's say, probably does not contribute an appropriate amount for the use, but I think it's something that is always up for conversation. I think when you take a look at Canmore Elevation Place, if you've ever gone into Elevation Place and saw how busy that place is, one, it's got that climbing wall structure that, honestly, you're in the mountains. Let's be clear, you're in the mountains. Everybody wants to climb, so that climbing wall is always busy, but the pool's pretty busy too. And they've got that leisure component within that, and I think that's a big draw. And same with when you take a look at Cardell Place up in the northeast. The big draw when you take a look at that place is not the lap pool. The lap pool is only 3 lanes. It's the leisure component. It's the lazy river. It's the hot tubs. It's the sauna. It's the water slide. So the right concept is here, and I think that's the right concept to be a major attractant for increased activity for both seniors, because now it's level entry. There's no stairs associated with it, and they can get to the back of the aquafit pool. 2, for families, there's something to do in the cold months of the winter where they can kind of feel like they're at the beach when they can't leave the country. And so those types of things are really active. And I was never a lap swimmer. And so I know there's some value in lap swimming as well, because there's lots of people that actively swim that from a physical activity perspective. So I think the leisure component and keeping the existing tank is the right concept. And I think keeping it as close, all the facilities together, gives us some economies of scale to make it run efficiently. And I think that's an important piece.
Yeah. Thank you.
Kelly, I'll jump in just for a second, because I know enough about the Cochrane project, which was it's a $100 million facility is what that facility is. And I had a long discussion with the mayor of Cochrane about how they got that done. And so when we start talking about the concept of PP3 and all these things get out there, what we have to understand and realize is that the town of High River, regardless of who else is involved, the town of High River will be eating at a bare minimum 95% of the capital cost just to get the place built. So that $100 million facility in Cochrane, Spray Lake Sawmill put in $1 million, and Rocky View County put in 2 to 3. He didn't know exactly what the number was, 2 to 3 million. There were a couple of little land contributions from both those guys in on that, but the capital cost of building that facility was $100 million, and they got about 3% from their PP3 contributions, right? So it sounds all warm and fluffy, and oh, we'll just, reach out and get a bunch of other people to help pay for it. The reality is that we plan for most of it, plan for all of it, really, is the smart thing to do, because when we're looking at even a $15 million build, you're down to hundreds of thousands of dollars. The $8 million field house expansion, the Cargill, 100 grand. That's all we got. So, those kinds of dollars, like I said, it gets floated out there that we need to just do partnerships and PP3 and stuff, but sorry, be very, very careful on those concepts, because the dollars aren't there.
It just goes back to my comment of controlling your destiny, right? At the end of the day, if we're going to go down that path, we should be able to control as much as we can, so that we're not waiting for funding to come in, that it's a clear process moving forward. And, I've worked on projects where we've had some fundraising, but we've taken the fundraising out of the core components of the building and focused on the soft stuff, right? So maybe they purchased the water slide, maybe they purchased the floating obstacle course, those types of components, right? That are add-ons after the fact, that you can add on components to it after the fact, or the sound system, those types of things. Better success from that perspective, because it's a finite number, and then they get their plaque on a sound system or whatever it may be. So
that's exactly what happened with the field house, right? It's exactly what happened. We had that big fundraiser night there, the one night, and we all had a great time and spent more money than we'd planned to when we showed up for various reasons. But what it paid for were balls and divider nets and the fluff, right? Like the one guy during the election, he told me, well, you just you need to get on it and fundraise. And I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? He said, well, get on bake sales and stuff like that. Okay, bake sales won't pay for the urinal pucks, right? It's just that's why you got to be very careful, and we have to own the costs, and if we can't pay for it all on our own, it's not the right project, and if some dollars come in, well, great, it eases the burden, right? But be very careful. Jenny.
Thank you. So because it doesn't really meet all the needs or the desires of the community, and won't this whole thing sort of happen again in 5 years or 10 years from now anyways? Because there's no room for expansion of any other, like another gymnasium, or I don't know if there's a place to put a climbing wall, or are we going to have the same conversation in 5 years, and now we've already spent $20 million and can't even afford anything else at that point? Or would it be better to say, kind of leave it as is, let's look 10, 15 years in the future, and how do we go from here to get to what we do need?
Yeah, I think, those are all good strategies. And I think that's something to bear in mind. I think when it comes to needs within the community, it's when I've always done these projects, it's what are people willing to pay for? Are they prepared to pay for what they want? So if a climbing wall is $5 million, are they prepared to pay $5 million for a climbing wall? Or if it's a new gymnasium, are they prepared to pay $5 million for a new gymnasium so that there's more basketball and more volleyball, that type of thing? And if you can quantify that and put a price to that and ask the people, are you prepared to pay? People will ask for everything, right? And they'll ask for everything under the sun, and their wants will outstrip their ability to pay for it. And so I think we can certainly do that. But at the same time, what do we do now? Do we start developing the concept and the business case for a brand new rec facility somewhere else in its entirety? Or do we plan on an expansion of some kind? And if we have to add $5 million to this ask, right? If we increase this from 15 million to 20 million and it's got a new gymnasium or a new climbing wall associated with it, that's okay. That, you know, at the end of the day, let's consider that as part of the package. So I think, you know, this was the concept that the previous council chose to take forward to ask the question. They asked the question, got a, you know, some would say a definite result. I would say that it's a indefinite result. You know, at the end of the day, it was like a 55-45 kind of split. And it was a much higher yes than I thought it was going to be from my experience. And usually when you take things forward for a referendum, it usually takes 3 attempts to get successful if you so chose to go down that path again. So I think there's 2 paths here. One, do we look at a new facility? Where is it? How do we acquire the land? How much are we willing to pay? How many partnerships are out there? And how long are we prepared to wait, knowing that we have to still invest in this facility to keep it operational? We still have water filters to replace at the pool at $400,000. We still have roofs to replace. We still have a slab to replace in the large arena sometime in the future in the next 3 to 5 years. And so is it better to reinvest in this facility or take a look at writing this one off and not putting any more maintenance dollars into it and looking and putting all those maintenance dollars into designing a new facility somewhere else? I think that's the tipping point where we're at right now, is that having that conversation, right?
Because I mean, I understand the whole leisure pool and, you know, this kind of fun slide and stuff like that, but it does only appeal to a small group of people, no?
It could, right? At the end of the day, you know, are there components that would have a greater appeal? Like maybe. And I think that's where if we want to do some more work on what the market really wants, doing that market research on what the community wants is probably some of the work that we could do leading up to the decision that council needs to make what the concept includes. So if council's the decision is we want to expand the existing Bob Snodgrass Recreation Center in some form, leave it as oblique as that right now and say, okay, what do you want to see in this expansion? We can find up to 13 or 20,000 square feet. We're prepared to find up to 15 or $20 million. Within that, tell us what you want. And then we figure out where we go from there. Now, does that upgrade the aquatic facility? No, maybe, I don't know. I think those are all good questions to ask the public. And I think, but council's got to make a decision whether this stays on the, like the mayor had stated, there's 3 options: expansion, new, or write it off and we're just going to keep what we have and do nothing. So those are really the three options out there that are tangible. And what that renovation of existing is, what it looks like, I think that's open for conversation. What is it? 13,000 square feet of aquatic space, or is it 8,000 square feet of aquatic space and 5,000 square feet of gymnasium space? It could be that too.
And Chris, prior to getting to what the referendum design was, we did go through exactly what Jenny's talking about with, you know, looking at all the wants and, you know, the climbing wall and all the other bells and whistles of turning the existing lane pool into that dry land facility, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, we do have those numbers there as well, but it was again, you know, the cost just got so high that we didn't feel we could afford it. So this is the thing that it always comes down to: needs, wants, and money. And
Well, what is something that can bring in the most revenue? Like, I don't think a leisure pool is going to bring in a whole lot of revenue versus a gymnasium that could be rented out for various things. Or I don't know. Maybe I'm completely wrong about that.
well, and we have a field house that does exactly that, right? So, you know, as far as a gymnasium goes, we kind of have that. But, you know, and that's, you're exactly right. This is the conversation, Jenny. You're bang on with trying to sort this out. Councillor Barton.
Thanks, Mayor. You know, one of the things that as I'm listening to this conversation is, you know, I kind of realizing that there's a lot of costs, especially operational costs, and there's a lot of other things that are associated with owning a new facility or an existing facility that we need to grapple with. And I think one component that I really liked with the field house was that there is some space that is for rent, right? To, I guess, Summit or LifeMark, I guess it is. Have we ever explored that idea, as like what the return is on, let's say we added another however many square feet are there for rent. If we were to rent, make an addition, are we going to get some more return? Are we going to help reduce our costs? Do we do other things, operational costs like solar or geothermal or anything like that to start to reduce costs? I know that's maybe not part of this particular project, but are those all feasible things that may return? I guess it's probably towards Chris.
Yeah, Councillor Barton, it's hard to say, because even our rental space that we have in the current recplex is, correct me if I'm wrong, Riley, what do we generate, like $30,000 a year?
To be honest, I can't remember. That whole space was supposed to be rented out too, and we never could rent out the balance. That's why we ended up taking it over as a studio. So there was more space available, and we did have a tenant potentially marked in at one point, but they, after the flood, decided couldn't make a go of it, and we did search after that, but we just couldn't find anyone who wanted the balance of that space.
I think it goes back to the model, right? At the end of the day, the model, you have to control your own destiny. And if you build commercial space, be prepared that it's going to be vacant for a period of time, and that it's going to go through periods of vacancies and occupancies from that perspective, and low points of the commercial marketplace. And I've seen municipalities try and do that, and where it's really successful is where you have coffee shops and small coffee shops, right? Like really cheap tenant hold improvements, those types of things. That makes more sense than larger spaces. Now, the other model, which we haven't really talked about, was, do you engage, entities like this, the YMCA, to come in and take over recreation, and at the end of the day, they've got to make money off, and they'll be approaching it from a money perspective. But we also got to wrestle with that other philosophy, is from a quality of life perspective. Does council want to see recreation generate more revenue, or do they want to see it enhance the life of living in this community and be attractive from that perspective? And that may be having subsidization through the taxation process. And that's the philosophies that are out there right now, that more and more recreation programs are sacrificing revenue for, this is just a good thing to promote good, healthy lifestyles within the communities, engaging our seniors, engaging our youth. And from those perspectives. But, Cochrane's, for example, is run by a society, an independent society that has representatives from the town of Cochrane on the board and from Rocky on the board of directors, but it's not controlled by the town at all.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Jenny?
When you say user fees or subsidizing, like, what you're thinking of, like free swimming, free skating?
Yeah,
what
those
about,
types of things, right?
Okay, what about the rental of space to like lacrosse and hockey? And
I think those things still, I think there's been, efforts in other communities where they have subsidized youth sports in particular, targeted that approach, where cut rate ice times are for youth sports versus market rate ice times. And I know, compared to the city of Calgary, our ice times are already cheap, right? And so I think, there's those components. Minor hockey, I think, when it comes to ice times, I think there's a market available for that, and I think they should pay for that aspect of things. But maybe we don't, drop-in swimming is now no longer a loony or a toonie, right? For the number of lifeguards that we have to accommodate, drop-in swimming, they collect the $80, but it costs us $240 in staff wages to deal with that. It's great to collect it, but it's also is it more of a headache than not, right? So I think there's a philosophy here that we have to discuss a bit when it comes to funding recreation, whether or not it's going to be tax subsidized or is it going to be user fee based. And where we are right now, if it's going to be user fee based, we've got a long way to go to be getting recovery costs, right? We've got to, if we want to get that 50% range or higher, we've got a long way to go. And so that's going to be sticker shock to a lot of groups and a lot of individuals. And you got to be careful that you don't increase the price so point that you drive people away.
Do you think people don't use it or because of the cost right now? Or do you think our
I can't answer that.
Okay.
I can't answer, but I could add. I know we are comparable to adjacent communities. So when you're talking about rates, increasing them, and we did this once before, we did increase rates to try increase cost recovery. And all we saw was our usership go down because they would go to adjacent communities. So how do you have to be careful just adjusting rates because there is a broader market there where we can lose our users too. We do see that our utilization during certain periods of the day isn't great. And, maybe there's an opportunity. How do we increase our ice utilization during daytime hours? Prime time is busy, but during the day, that's always a struggle. And so how do we get better utilization there? And so that may be an approach to look at as well. And like Chris was saying, it's kind of that philosophy. There's a social benefit to having this facility here in terms of a gathering place, in terms of mental well-being. And you can't put a number on that. So, how do we weigh that in terms of our rates and our rate recovery, and where do we go? It's a hard conversation, and it's even harder to, I guess, define or move forward with.
We are really lucky to have the facility that we have. The forethought to build that back in the day is so valuable now that it's hard. Like, think about just getting rid of it in its entirety. What kind of impact that would have on the community. And so we're lucky that we're in this dilemma to have this conversation. Right? There's a lot of communities that are just starting from scratch to try and figure out a way. Be it a 5,000 person trying to build a $30 million facility that we, or $100 million facility that we have. Like ours is probably worth $100 million.
Would that have to happen?
Pardon me?
Would that have to happen if you built a new facility? Would we have to get rid of this one?
Well, you wouldn't be able to afford to operate both.
Even if they had different things in them?
You come down to economies of scale, right? When you have all your facilities grouped into one, your economies of scale for operations are reduced quite a bit. And so that's a cost-conscious decision that council would have to make to split up facilities and move them around town into different locations. But then you're also adding the cost of land acquisition. Whatever the cost of the land to acquire would have to be added on to that, $15 million or $17 million option. Because we wouldn't have a parcel big enough to integrate that in. Does that make sense, Jenny?
Somewhat, yeah. Thank you.
Well, I'm a broken record here, but it comes down to the capital costs of how much money do we have and what can we build. It's nice to think that we're going to, if we had all the money, then sure, build a new facility and figure out how to operate it. The capital costs are first and foremost is to figure out, like, what can we actually afford? And, right now we've got a borrowing availability of $32 million. If you take 15 million just on this expansion, if that's what we were going to do, that cuts that in half. So, you got to be very, very careful. And there's only so much money. $32 million doesn't even build us a standalone swimming pool. And we're done. We're broke. So the borrowing is out the door. So, and then you get into the operating expenses, right? So capital is I don't know. It's just, we only have $32 million to play with. And how much of that do you want to spend? Councillor Kinghorn, and then Jones, and then Barton.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass, and appreciate your comments, Councillor Jones, but even with the second facility, the original one, this one, you'll still have those fixed lighting costs. You'll still have those fixed heating costs. We'll still have a lot of the costs associated. Mind you, it'd be a little bit less, but those costs are still going to exist. So, you know, one of the things we talked about rates and creating a larger revenue stream for the operational costs. I'll tell you what, if you go talk to those swim clubs in High River, their backs are to the wall as it is today. And in fact, I think it was probably 3 years ago where we were in jeopardy of losing one of our swim clubs because they couldn't afford the rental rates of the pool. So we need to keep those organizations in the loop on this whole discussion as well, I think, because they have a fixed number that they can pay. Anyhow, so we're going round and round on this a little bit, Mayor Snodgrass. Where do we go from here?
Well, that's the purpose of this meeting, is to do exactly that, go around and round and round with conversation. We're a ways away from making the decision. So I want to make sure that every counselor has the opportunity to get clarity on their questions and everything else. So yeah, it will be exactly that for a while, Jamie. And this is, I think, when Chris and I have talked, we need probably 2 or 3 or 4 of these meetings before we get into a decision time for sure. So I can't give you a timeline as to when. We'll see after this meeting kind of what the next meeting's conversation is about. Councillor Barton.
Thanks, Mayor. Guess one question I have, and Riley and Chris might know better than the answer for this, but if we were, let's say we were to start projecting putting in a new facility, but we did it based on our population growth, when do you think we could afford to replace a facility similar to what we have? Let's say you say it's 100 million or we spend 80 million. Do we need to get to like 18,000? Do we need to get to 20 or 25?
To replace the existing facility?
Yeah.
I think you're looking at 30 to 35,000 population.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment too.
Yeah. And that would be the bare minimum. You even at 35, I think you'd be fine line. I think how Cochrane made theirs work based upon the fact that they thought they had stronger partnerships, but it was the society running it, and so that cost is off their books. Canmore got a significant grant application that made theirs work from a capital side of things, but when you take a look at their operational side of things, their user fees are quite expensive. So
right. Okay, thank you.
Cochrane's 35,000 people.
Is it really?
That's the population of Cochrane as of 2021, 35,000 people.
I didn't think it was that much. Okay.
yeah, it's larger than Okotoks now.
Kelly?
Thanks. I think, when you look at the Canmore one, because anytime you drive into town, it's pretty much the first thing you see. And it's an attraction, no question. So, when you're looking at what your offerings are in terms of how that's going to attract the unmeasurable benefits by way of guest spend that comes into town, that certainly, it's not a measurable that we can put to it, but it certainly is a benefit to the community, and it certainly has a positive, and that novelty and all of that kind of stuff. But I do think that there are other non-measurable benefits that we will also need to consider in our deliberations. So I don't know, do we need to keep going today, or are we where are we at with everything?
No, I think we'll probably leave it. We got a meeting starting at 2:00 in 10 minutes. So we'll probably, if there's no more questions for today, we'll probably, we got it opened up. We're started here, and we'll talk with Chris as to kind of where the next meeting discussion should be narrowed down into to try to continue this conversation. So But this is not a decision that can be made quickly or lightly. So we're talking about tens and tens of millions of dollars. So.
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm going to just touch base on Canmore. Canmore's got a population of 16,000 people as of the last census, but their biggest difference between us and them is they've got 9,200 private dwelling units. So they've got a strong second homeowner contingency there that also fuels into that. Compared to us at 6,200 parcels, we're about 5,200 dwelling units. So that's a, you know, that's a pretty healthy dwelling unit number. And that's all based upon those second homeowners that they do struggle with it, right? So.
I think you can argue that both ways, can't you?
You can, yeah, you can.
Attraction for people to come. You got to get a guest population because it's a tourist destination. But by the same token, your base of people who live there is different. Yeah.
No further questions on this topic for today. We got about 5 minutes for question and answer. I think the only one that I will bring up quickly, Riley, is please keep an eye on the downtown snow removal, making sure that it is meeting expectations.
Sure, I know Pete's been having conversations with them and accommodating them to a certain degree with their staffing issues, and the provider has been very I get open with us in terms of the challenges with staff he's have right now, but that should be, they indicated, turning around here shortly. And we have reminded them of the requirements in the contract. So we did kind of flex a little bit in terms of getting that first pass through downtown and then coming back and cleaning up. So it was being done in 2 passes. But yeah, Pete's on it. He's been, like I said, having a number of conversations with them, and they've been very welcoming and transparent with us. They've been pretty good to work from that regard.
Staffing issues, if that's an issue, that's not our issue. That's their issue. Their issue is they need to meet the expectations of the contract they signed up for. That's just the way it works. And if you don't have staff, you need to hire more staff or whatever. You need to manage that better. There's an expectation of how this gets done. And I'm all in for the learning curves and everything else as to the actual thing, but you need to have the manpower to pull this off properly. So
agreed. And they are on board with doing that. They kind of like us, they had some vacancies and just couldn't recover or hire fast enough to recoup from that. But I think they've got it sorted out here. So.
Okay. No further questions. Meeting adjourned 1:53 p.m. See you at 2 o'clock. Bye.